Right, expose one tonight of two. We covered in From Russia with Love the atrocities that went on in Russia. And this article that was sent to me kind of goes in a little bit deeper of who were involved in it and how it all morphed into something a lot bigger and more modern day. But back in 2006, there was an article by Mike Walsh, who's Jewish himself, and an admission appeared in the Israeli news source Ynet News, and it echoes much of what my research and knowledge brought forth in the From Russia with Love series. But before we start, this article references Jews, but these are not the ordinary Jews. In fact, they are unlikely to be real Jews at all, and maybe not even human. And it was titled Stalin's Jews and written by Jewish columnist Seva Plocher. And this piece confirmed the terrible crimes which Jewish communists had committed under Stalin. And he said, we must not forget that some of the greatest murderers of modern times were Jewish. Plocher started out by saying, and he went on to make a number of startling confessions. And he said, here's a particularly forlorn historical date, almost 90 years ago, between the 19th and 20th of December 1917, in the midst of the Bolshevik Revolution and Civil War, which was got nothing to do with Russians at all, Lenin signed a decree calling for the establishment of the all-Russian, except it wasn't Russian, Extraordinary Commission for Combating Counter-Revolution and Sabotage, known as Cheka, C-H-E-K-A. And within a short period of time, Cheka became the largest and cruelest state security organisation. And its organisational structure was changed every few years. That sounds familiar, as were its names. Sounds even more familiar, because that's a common theme that for them, as our listeners will know too well. So from Cheka to GPU, later to NKVD, and later to KGB, which is now run by the Black Sun Generals. And the Jewish columnists said, we cannot know with certainty the number of deaths Cheka was responsible for in its various manifestations, but the number is surely at least 20 million, including victims of the forced collectivization, the hunger, large purges, expulsions, banishments, executions, and mass deaths at gulags. Well, I will fill in the doubts. There was 70 to 90 million Russians were murdered by these Jewish organizations between 1917 and 1945. The Jew Genrikh Yagoda, who was the director of NKVD, was the Soviet Union's Stalin-era security and intelligence agency. And whole population strata were eliminated. All independent farmers, ethnic minorities, members of the bourgeoisie, senior officers, intellectuals, artists, labour movement activists, opposition members who were defined completely randomly, and countless members of the Communist Party itself. And in his new highly praised book, The War of the World, historian Niall Ferguson writes that no revolution in the history of mankind devoured its children with the same unrestrained appetite as did the Soviet Revolution. And in his book on the Stalinist purges, Tel Aviv University's Dr. Yigal Halfin writes that Stalinist violence was unique in that it was directed internally. Lenin, Stalin and their successors could not have carried out their deeds without wide-scale cooperation of disciplined terror officials, cruel interrogators, snitches, executioners, guards, judges, perverts and many bleeding hearts who were members of the progressive Western left and were deceived by the Soviet regime of horror and even provided it with a kosher certificate. And he said it should also be noted that Washington DC and Westminster and London were complicit in this, and censorship of Soviet genocide by pro-Soviet media. Also, pro-Soviet means Jewish media. And he said, and us, the Jews. An Israeli student finishes high school without ever hearing the name Henryk Yagoda, the greatest Jewish murderer of the 20th century, the GPU's deputy commander and the founder and commander of the NKVD. And he said Yagoda diligently implemented Stalin's collectivization orders and is responsible for the deaths of at least 10 million people. His Jewish deputies established and managed the Gulag system, and after Stalin no longer viewed him favourably, and you all know what happens to agents who go the other way, Yagoda was demoted and executed, and was replaced as chief hangman in 1936 by Yezhov, who was dubbed the bloodthirsty dwarf. Yezhov was not Jewish, but was blessed with an active Jewish wife, according to the report. And in his book, Stalin, Court of the Red Star, Jewish historian Sebag Montefiore writes that during the darkest period of terror, when the communist killing machine worked in full force, Stalin was surrounded by beautiful young Jewish women. And Stalin's close associates and loyalists include a member of the Central Committee of Politburo, Lazar Kaganovich, and Montefiore characterizes him as the first Stalinist and adds that those starving to death in Ukraine, an unparalleled tragedy in the history of humankind, did not move Kaganovich once. And he said many Jews sold their soul to the devil of the communist revolution and have blood on their hands for eternity. And he said, we'll mention just one more. Leonid Reichman, head of the NKVD's special department and the organization's chief interrogator, who was a particularly cruel sadist. And in 1934, according to published statistics, 38.5% of those holding the most senior posts in the Soviet security apparatus were of Jewish origin. And he said, even if we deny it, we cannot escape the Jewishness of our hangmen, who served the Red Terror with loyalty and dedication from its establishment. After all, others will always remind us of their origin. Kaganovich, Stalin, Postchev and Voroshilov were all involved in 1934, and the infamous Soviet gulags were under the direct control of the Jewish Yagoda. But he was not the only such Jew involved in the running of these camps, in which millions were interned and nearly 1.4 million died. Those gulags and camps then moved to Poland and other regions and were blamed on the Germans. Wrong. And the most famous revelation about the Jewish nature of the gulags was that of famous dissident Alexander Solzhenitsyn, And speaking from personal experience as a Gulag prisoner, Solzhenitsyn gave a candid account of Jews in charge of the Soviet prison camps in his book, 200 Years Together. And according to his observations, Jews made up a clear preponderance in the Gulag administration and in the early Bolshevist government, saying that of the 22 ministers in the first Soviet government, 3 were Russian, 1 Georgian, 1 Armenian, and 17 were Jews. In addition, he points out from personal experience once again that 2/3 of the Kiev Cheka secret police, that's Ukraine, were also Jews. In 1937, another book appeared in Germany called Jewish-Run Concentration Camps in the Soviet Union, which revealed that communist Jews were the commandants of 11 of the 12 main gulags. His story rarely covers this topic. And it's like a modern-day COVID exposure ban. And this topic and brutality has been kept all hidden under the category of conspiracy, with a fallback of labelling people anti-Semitist to those who dare to question them. But more and more of the real truth is emerging. And this article, remember, was written by Jewish people. They know what has gone on. And I appeal once again, do not target the average Jewish person on the street for crimes done in their name. These bastards are the very apex of sheer evil and have destroyed many lives and countries with their abject filth. But rest assured, one day this world and its people will run them back from where they came. And no, it was not from this planet. Expose 2. The CIA MKUltra mind control program that required torturing children into multiple personalities was alive and well and under the control of Jesuit priests at Joseph's Abbey in Spencer, Massachusetts, according to the ex-nun Sister Kerry Berner. Now, Sister Berner was recently interviewed by President Trump, and she supported his fight against child trafficking, feeling that her years as a Catholic nun gave her insight into the CIA, Jesuits and Catholic Church rampant pattern of sexual abuse that had an ultimate goal of subjugating all people. Now, Berner felt that this Vatican-sponsored child trafficking and sexual abuse of children had been going on throughout history and continued unabated today. I disagree on that. There's been lots of shutdowns. But she said even more disconcerting was that Congress had been aware since at least 1964, after congressional hearings on human experimentation, that this child exploitation was ingrained in the CIA's mind control program. Now, you can review CIA child abuse survivors Claudia Mullen and Christine Nicola testifying before the Congressional Committee, and there'll be links posted on the transcripts on the Patreon for those two. Now, Nicola talked of Dr. Green. Our members will be familiar with that. Green is the colour code of the programme, not the actual name of the doctor, who tortured her throughout her childhood. And she found evidence that Green was paid by the CIA to run their MKUltra program in Canada. And in this video, another CIA torture survivor, Jenny Hill, discussed a Dr. Green who is in charge of a satanic paedophilia and murder rite that took place on June 21st, 1965, on the summer solstice in Garden Grove, California. And the CIA has been known to work hand in hand with the Vatican's satanic Ninth Circle child sacrifice cult to run an international child trafficking and drug and gun running ring. And in her biography, 22 Faces, Hill claimed that she was tortured and made to watch the human sacrifice of another 6-year-old child, later identified as Kathleen Shea. Evidently, Shea had been kidnapped from Tyrone, Pennsylvania several months prior and appeared starved and emaciated before her summer solstice death by the Satanic Coven. Now, back in 1972, NYPD Detective James Rothstein arrested one of the 5 Watergate burglars, the CIA operative Frank Sturgis. Now, during a 2-hour interrogation, he discovered that the burglars weren't trying to obtain election strategies as the mainstream media proposed, but were looking for a book which listed Democrat and Republican politicians who accessed child prostitutes, their sexual proclivities, and the amounts they paid to rape children. And Rothstein maintained that the Watergate break-in was strictly based on one thing: the pedophile records that were being kept at the Democratic National Headquarters. I guess nothing's changed 50 years later. And it was well known in Washington that pictures, videos and recordings of prolific pedophile parties were used to blackmail politicians. Even back in Watergate days, the children were believed obtained through an international child trafficking ring run by the CIA Vatican Mafia connections. And of course that would have been around the time of the infamous Young Boys Club operating in and out of the White House, with rumours of it still ongoing in the Obama era. Now, the Vatican's Ninth Circle cult members were said to be global leaders heavily involved in pedophilia and based in countries worldwide. And the Ninth Circle began at least 3 centuries ago in the Vatican, according to Kevin Annett, who is an investigative arm of the ICLC Court, the ITCCS group stated, but has expanded to embrace local satanic child sacrifice cults across Europe and the Americas. And thanks to Catholic pressure, the Ninth Circle affiliated strongly with Nazi or National Zionism cultic groups that had close ties with the Waffen SS during the 1930s and 1940s. Same people, same problem. In 1953, the CIA imported Nazi mind control experts from Hitler's Germany for the purpose of developing assassins and super spies. Except it was not Hitler's Germany at all. It was the same sub-grey people, Jewish elites, that ransacked Russia and murdered between 70 and 90 million Rus. And this MKUltra program of illegal human experimentation was centered on torturing the developing brain of a child to secure lifetime control over the victim. The severe abuse often began in the womb and at least by age 6, then continued throughout the victim's lifetime. And this brings in the Svarli story that we covered, Illuminati 1 and 2, because of that type of, quote, training, unquote, also started in the womb. Now, the mention of age 6 brings in the etheric cord connection, and if it's not acquired by that age, it is said the child would never rise above, quote, retard level, unquote. Now, MKUltra utilised 149 sub-projects and 33, there's that number again, related programs that were set up in 80 US and Canadian institutions, including 44 colleges and universities, all paid for out of US taxpayers' money from a prolific CIA black budget. Now, universities' involvement in skullduggery aligned with the CIA was also covered in From Russia with Love. But it's something we need to bear in mind. It is pure folly to send any of your children to universities or colleges until these criminals are all cleaned out, their programs, agendas, plans and shell companies that are used to throw people off the scent also. Now, it was believed to continue today as directed by the Vatican's Jesuit priests at Joseph's Abbey in Massachusetts, and in 1964, after congressional investigations, the CIA director Richard Helms claimed that he had shut down the MKUltra mind control program. Yeah, right. But not before destroying all records. He lied. It just went further underground at Montauk and many other places we have highlighted in our shows, like the research centres. That's another thing that needs to be addressed. All research centres need to be closed immediately, and an impartial public group of assessors need to evaluate every piece of research ongoing and assess whether it is of value to we the people, and if not, all of it should be destroyed and never allowed to operate again without public supervision. Now, survivor respondents to the 2007 Extreme Abuse Survey appeared to have disagreed that the MKUltra mind control program was closed. There were 257 who said secret government-sponsored mind control experiments were performed on them as children, many of whom were born after 1964. And even though Congress held hearings on the CIA MKUltra program in 1964 and again in 1977, results of the congressional inquiries were not released to the public in the interest of national security. The interests of national security. That is another program and policy that needs to be repealed, because the interest of national security means only to cover up the crimes of the CIA and other agencies. Period. You know, in a world of data and spying by these very same groups, how is it all Congress groups have never allowed the same scrutiny of the very people that are spying on us? Vatican, check. CIA, check. SS. Remember, the CIA before that was OSS. Check. Operation Paperclip, check. All dot connected in our From Russia with Love series, and all link back to the Hebrew Anunnaki group. Now, several survivors of the torturous child abuse were bred, yes, you heard that correctly, by their satanic perpetrator parents for the program. And they bravely testified before Congress, exposing their horrific abuse throughout childhood, yet the government took no action. Cathy O'Brien's book Transformation of America is but one example. But there was hope after Sister Berner's interview with President Trump. She was convinced that he was doing all he could to overcome this CIA Vatican globalist agenda designed to control the population through mind control techniques perpetrated on severely abused children. Now, Trump's official act the morning of his inauguration was to visit CIA headquarters, where he allegedly declared a war on human trafficking. Now, since Trump came into office, access to child trafficking was said to have been shut down in Saudi Arabia, the Clintons' pedophile-linked Epstein Island, Haiti, North Korea, China, Russia and Cuba. And according to Q Posts on August 15th, a roundup of child exploitation rings appeared pending in Sudan, Syria, Yemen, Libya and Somalia. And this past year, it is said over 45,000, I keep hearing about these, sealed indictments have been filed against political and other well-known elites in federal courts across the nation. And most charges were believed to involve pedophilia, sex abuse and child trafficking. And those indictments were expected to be unsealed very soon, with arrests and military tribunals on the menu. Yes, the very soon and 2 weeks narrative has long since worn thin. Our long-term members will know that narrative of mass arrests has been ongoing since David Wilcock back in 2002, where it was stated they were coming soon. So forgive me if I won't hold my breath on these predictions. And the point is, why are these 45,000 sealed indictments? Why aren't they publicly available? What are they waiting for? It must be over 18 months since the first mention of all these 1,000 sealed indictments. Where have they gone? What have they done? About as much as the trustee, I might add. But the sheer fact this is now being highlighted changes the whole dynamic. Yes, it's not pleasant to listen to. It's not pleasant for me to read or write it either. But it changes the dynamic. Out of the darkness into the light.